defensive lines in this game. Any commonalities in what makes the two groups, Oregon's and Arizona's defensive line so effective?
I mean, I think they got good athletes. I know what they have. I mean, it's a different scheme, but they got good athletes on their front. You know, with Sutton and Anyele, if I'm saying his name the right way, Crawford. You know, they're really athletic, can really run. They got some quickness to them. They aren't the biggest group in the world, but they're very active. So, you know, you're impressed with how hard they play. So.
How well do you know Todd Graham? Do you know him at all?
Don't know him at all. I met him once.
What do you think of what he's done with the program?
I think he's done a nice job so far. You know, he's 5-1. I've said they should be ranked. I don't know if they are.
Coaches pulled
Are they? They should.
First team.
You know, they lost a close game to Missouri, who's in the SEC, and then they've won every other game that's been on their schedule and playing really well on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they're extremely efficient. I think Taylor Kelly hasn't thrown a pick in 99 attempts. You know, you watched them last week and throw 5 touchdowns. You know, they've got some they got some backs. You know, I think he's done a really, really nice job in terms of taking over a program and then, you know, really trying to institute what he wants to get accomplished. And it's definitely his offense, definitely his defense. You know, it's different than what they were doing before down there. So, but he's done a really, really good job of getting that team to buy in, and they're playing at a pretty high level right now. So.
The pass efficiency numbers would seem to show they're not making a lot of mistakes. Their penalty numbers have changed dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there ways that shows in like X's and O? I mean, it seems like they're a more disciplined team.
They are, it seems like they've got a real good grasp and understanding of what he's trying to get accomplished. You know, and they look like they're a really well coached team when you see them on film. And obviously, I haven't seen them in person, but when you see them on film, they look like a really well coached team. And so that's a credit to him and his staff that he brought in there.
Looking at their defensive numbers, they are good. Some of the offenses they've faced have not been very good. How do you take that into account when you're assessing the quality of a team? Because I know you've said before, until you match up with them, you don't know for sure how you're going to
We don't assess the quality of a team. I think that's a little bit different. We're going on what their scheme is and how they line up. So it's, you know, we don't say, hey, this 3 technique isn't good, so let's not block them. You know, we just want to know how they're lining up, what scheme they're in, and you know, how many times they pressure, what coverages are they playing behind it, and all that stuff. But you're not looking at it from that standpoint. So it's tough to compare because some of those teams we've never seen the other team that they played either. So we haven't seen anybody, you know, the 2 teams they played. We haven't seen Utah, we haven't seen Colorado, haven't seen Cal. That's their 3 league games, and then they played Missouri and Illinois and Northern Arizona. So it's, you know, sometimes like, hey, they're running this and covering this kid this way, and we know who that kid is. So there's still a lot of unknowns, even though it's our 7th game of the season. But we're really, when we assess them, we're assessing what is their schemes and how are they deploying their guys, and how do we make sure we match up with them. So
somebody who looks at the numbers and says, hey, it's hard to judge when you say a team is good, you're judging that in a totally different way than somebody just looking at stats.
It's the same thing, and we don't look just at stats. I think if you do, you can kind of get fooled. You know, it's the same thing with us. Well, we've given up a lot of points. Well, our 3s and 4s gave up a lot of points, but our 1s haven't. So I think sometimes when you look at the totality of it, I know when we self-scout ourselves, we self-scout it when our 1s are in the game, and when our 2s are in the game, we're not looking for tendencies that we're calling with the 2s, because a lot of time that gets skewed. Well, it's a real balanced team. It's a real balanced team because they run the ball every single play in the second half, or they're a little bit different in the first half. You know, and I think that's the difference. Or it's a real heavy run team. What's a real heavy run team? Because they're up in all their games, and at the end of the game, they're running it out. Or this team throws the ball a lot. Well, they've been behind. I don't think that's really their MO. In the first and second quarters, they weren't doing that, but in the second half, they were behind, so they were throwing it every snap. So sometimes the statistics can be skewed a little bit. So.
Do you self-scout every week?
Yeah, we always do. You know, there's always a process for us to go through. What are we doing, and how are we deploying it, and it's a lot more technical than I think. You know, what's our percentages and everything. It's, you know, are we running strong? Are we running weak? Are we throwing out of this formation, or is you know, everybody's looking for 100%. You know, in this formation, this is all they do. In this down and distance, this is all they do. But sometimes you can outcoach yourself, and because that may be all you do, but you're 100% efficient in it. So do you change because they think they know what's going to come, or do you change just because you outguessed yourself? Is like, hey, we want to change this up this week because we've always done this. Well, we've always done it because it worked. So at a point in time, you also got to, hey, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. So
Cameron Marshall has had some good games in the past since he seems like they're using not quite as much as he has in years past, but what kind of challenges does he present?
big, strong back, runs very physical. I think they've got three, with Foster and Marshall and Grice, and their statistics are all in the 40-yard rushing range. So I think they try to get their backs involved. The one thing about this team is they throw the ton to their backs. So, you got to worry about them not only in the run game, but also in the passing game. And the fact that they got three, I think, kind of speaks to their depth a little bit. Usually when you got one, it's because you don't have a two or a three, where I think they've got three. DJ Foster is a really skilled athlete. Reminds me a little bit of DeAnthony in terms of how they're using him as a true freshman. He caught a long touchdown against Colorado. And then Grice is another kid, that the real effective kid coming out of the backfield. So
is it still a similar type of screen game? Because they obviously relied on screens under the last staff a lot.
No, they're not. They're different than what Dennis and those guys were doing. They're still throwing to the backs, but it's a different way of getting the ball to those guys.
BCS out this afternoon. I know. I mean, it's the formula by which they decide who plays for the national title, which is the goal for any team. So do you let yourself care one whit at this point?
No, and just because of the time. Yeah. So there's a lot of football to be played between now and the first week of December. I don't even know when our conference is our conference championship game in December, or is it end of November somewhere? So I think our whole philosophy has always been it's a 1 week deal, because if you lose, you're out. And it's who's there early. Sometimes isn't there late. And the only way you can get there late is if you don't really worry and get caught up in that things. And it goes back to our basically our whole thing is let's not worry about things we don't control, and what we don't control is rankings and all those other things. Is we got to take care of business on the field, and if we take care of business on the field, we feel like you pick your head up in December and you'll be in a pretty good spot. But if you're all worried about that and all your energy's focused on this, then I think you're just wasting time. So.
Stories out of Boston and Seattle this week with the Patriots and Seahawks matching up. I think Pete Carroll said he was jokingly upset at you that you would help the Patriots a little bit this offseason.
Well, I've been to Pete's practices too. Yeah. So
did you give him any tip or Patriots?
I talk football with usually when you go visit teams, you talk football with them, and Pete was gracious enough to have me up there. I went up there last year, actually 2 years ago during the season, which is kind of unheard of. Yeah. And Pete was great. And I've been to visit Bill and his staff, but I've also been to the Dolphins, I've been to the 49ers, I've been to the Bills, I've been to a lot of different programs. So, but I think a little that's overblown. Sure. If you think I don't think you're going to see Tom Brady run the zone read today. So.
But at the same time, they acknowledge, even Tom Brady at least, said something about how that they're becoming more fast-paced, no huddle, and that's elements of what you guys do in the college game are becoming more and more prevalent.
I've said this, we didn't invent it.
Sure.
I mean, Sam Weiss was doing this back in the Bengals in the day. The K-Gun Bills were doing this in the NFL, and other people have run it. I think, like any good coach, and Pete's a great coach, and Bill's a great coach, is that you take your personnel, and then what do we do to give them a chance to be successful? And I think that's what they're doing. You look at what Seattle's doing defensively. They're playing unbelievable, and I think Seattle's doing a good job with Russell Wilson, who I'm a big fan of. We played against him and really impressed with him of playing a rookie quarterback and doing that. And who knows? Pete may do it, in a couple of years, in a year after Russell gets his feet wet, because I know Russell could handle it. But I think they're just all playing to their strengths. And so.
Did the play call and the one-word play call? Did you get? Is that something that you
got from someone? That's all different. That stuff's all overblown, because what makes sense to them doesn't make sense to us. Sometimes it's topical things from your area that hey, we call it this because that's the name of a dorm on campus. Well, none of them have been on a dorm on campus, so they don't know what that means. So, I think all of that's a little bit overblown.
At the same degree, though, it's got to be flattering at some point. Belichick says he learned something from you.
I learned a lot from him, so it's more than a two-way street. When you get a chance to visit with Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick, I got a lot more out of it than I guarantee they did. So it was just me on a fact-finding mission trying to make us better. So there's things that we did that I learned when I was in Seattle, and there's things that we do that I learned when I was in New England. So.
It sounded like they came here, New England staff. Is that? I'm not sure. Okay.
A lot of things. I don't know if you guys know. Some things that are written is not always true. Just going to throw that out there. So. Bill's never been here. Pete's been here, but Pete was coaching University of Southern California at the time. So.
State of your kicking game overall. I was wondering, looking at your punt numbers in particular. Jackson's frustrated with zone play, but your punt coverage. I mean, you guys are first in the nation.
Our coverage has been really, really good. I think in our kicking game itself, we haven't, and it's a positive, is we haven't punted that much. We haven't attempted many field goals because we're finishing off in the red zone with touchdowns. So, I still think.
Is that affecting those units?
I don't know. I would still say with our kicking game, I guess the jury's out in terms of where we are, but we haven't been in a game where we need to have a clutch kick. We haven't been in a game where, hey, we need a punt here to kind of get us some breathing room and get us out of it. And that's a fortunate situation, but I would say the kind of jury's still out. The state of our kicking game is, it's okay, but I think a lot of it is we haven't asked the punt team or the field goal team to do a whole heck of a lot. So.
You still feel confident if you are put in that position?
I mean, Jackson Rice is I think one of the best punters in the conference, but we just, fortunately, and it's a good thing, we haven't been in a situation where, they're coming over the walls. We need a punt. We need to get some breathing room and get them pinned down there. We just haven't been in that situation right now. And the same thing, we haven't had, hey, we need a real clutch kick right now. And the only way you get those is in games. We try to manufacture things like that in practice, but it's a different deal. So, we got confidence. I got confidence in our field goal protection and that snap and hold and all that operation. But until we get put in a situation where it's got to be a clutch one, you never know.
A series of games against ranked opponents coming up. I mean, do you figure the kicking game is a bigger factor in potentially closer games?
I hope not.
The way they're kicking right now, you mean?
I mean, just that I hope we're not in a situation where we have to come down to a kick is what I'm hoping for. Yeah. But we're not naive enough to think that, hey, we don't have to practice punt or we don't have to practice field goal today. We practice field goal as when we're in Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays when we're in pads where we can get a rush and get after those guys and try to get a block and do those things and try to put some pressure on those guys. And it's always factored into the practice, but we don't. Again, do you need it or you don't need it? And we all know. I mean, we're not going through. Everybody's going to play. There's going to be a close game at some point in time, and it's going to come down to teams. And I've always said that, especially in this league, that there's certain games that's going to come down to it's the turnover battle and it's teams. And we've got confidence in our guys, but we just haven't had to put our punt team or our field goal team in that situation yet.
Any update on the Remington situation?
No, and it's like anything else. Whenever there's an update, we'll make sure you guys know. And I know you guys got questions about participating in practice. He goes to practice every day. He works out with our strength coaches because when he does come back, it's not like he's going to take a 1 week layoff, 2 week layoff, 4 week layoff, whatever it is. But he's not getting reps in team, and we've got to make a plan of that he's not going to get reps because we got to be ready to go play a game without him. So. But when he's at practice every day, he's in full pads, just like if a kid's injured, they're in full pads, unless they can't put pads on. And then when we're in team periods, and he goes and works out with our strength coaches to make sure he stays in shape. So.
Alioti said yesterday that he needed to watch the practice before you guys would decide if maybe you'd bring some of the third team guy in the rotation.
Yeah, we talk about that afterwards. We get so many reps in practice, and I think that part's a little bit overblown. You look out there, our last play in team, Marcus Mariota was a quarterback and Kenny Bassett was a running back. I mean, and it's not like, why is Kenny in with Marcus? We don't care. It's just we get as many reps as we can, as much as we can, and on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday when we have pads on, and then when those guys, we got to make a determination on who's playing and not. But our D-line, they all rotate through every spot. We got 1 million guys running through there. There's still 8, 9, 10 guys that are practicing there, even with Isaac being out. So, to determine who's going to play on Thursday night doesn't make any sense because of a kick and roll and ankle in practice on Wednesday. So, and there's no reason to. It's the same. We've always had the same philosophy. So everything we try to do is just get as many reps as we can in practice. But he's not in the reps of practice because he's over with our strength coaches working out. So, okay.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Chad.